I just want to start before I get into my review of 28 Years Later. If my opinion is different than yours, that's okay. If you give this movie a 10 out of 10, if you give this movie a 0 out of 10, if you are the only person that you know in existence that either loves or hates this movie, it's okay. Your opinion is still valid. We have to stop this fucking discourse around people's literal personal opinions on movies. With that being said, hold on to your butt cheeks as I tell you what disappointed me about 28 Years Later. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you, of course. I just got off work, came home. I'm going to film a quick review for 28 Years Later, the new zombie horror film from director Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland, which is the duo that brought us the original 28 Days Later over 20 years ago, back in 2002, which is a movie that I believe, and a lot of folks believe, spawned a resurgence into the zombie genre. Am I going to do that every time I say zombie? The reason being is because I know they are not technically zombies in this film, but obviously playing on that classic horror subgenre and just adding certain elements to it, which is my point, because you got The Last of Us, you got The Walking Dead, of course, on TV, you got Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, you got the brilliant Train to Busan about 5 years ago, and really any other iteration of the zombie film or television program that came post 28 Days Later at least employed some of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's influence in its portrayal. We also got 28 Weeks Later, about 5 years after the original was released, and that one was a little lackluster, although it had some really cool elements to it, but it was missing that creative duo of Garland and Boyle, and it didn't have that kind of inventive, unique flair to it that we got in the original, that, like I said, reinvented an entire subgenre basically by itself. Well, what I was so excited about going into this year's 28 Years Later is that we are getting that creative duo back. The writer on this film is Alex Garland, who is a filmmaker and a screenwriter that I absolutely adore. He's easily one of my favorites that is active today, even though he said he's retiring, but we got Warfare this year, and now we have his involvement in 28 Years Later, so I'm questioning his actual retirement. And then Danny Boyle, who has got a extremely unique style to his filmmaking, and he has kept true to that for over 30 years. Films like Trainspotting and, of course, 28 Days Later, Slumdog Millionaire, even movies like The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio, and a film called 127 Hours based on a true story starring James Franco. Those are all movies that have a very similar style in terms of the craft, with the quick cuts, the jump edits, the close-ups, the frantic kind of nature of the way that he films his movies, and we get a lot of the DNA that we expect in that regard from Danny Boyle here with 28 Years Later also. By the way, this is the launching of a new trilogy in this franchise. There's going to be another film which has already been made, and it's in post-production. It's going to be coming out in January of next year, directed by Nia DaCosta, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. And seeing what we got in this movie and some of my qualms with this film actually, in a weird kind of way, make me even more excited for The Bone Temple that we're getting in January. And I'll kind of elaborate on that. My intention is for this to be a spoiler-free review, because a lot of my gripes with the film are going to lie in spoiler territory, but I am going to be super generic on this review because I don't want to ruin it for anybody else that might be a fan of the franchise or might be diving into this new trilogy from Boyle and Garland, obviously starting with this film. So I'm going to keep it spoiler-free. Let's talk a little bit about 28 Years Later. It's been 28 years and the Rage virus escaped a biological weapons lab. Now, still in ruthlessly enforced quarantine, some have found ways to exist amidst the infection. So, the infected are what they're called. I might refer to them on this video as zombies, but I'm telling you up front, giving you a little subtext, that I know they are not zombies. I am a horror guy. I have the sign to prove it. So I realize that they are not actual undead zombies. However, they carry a lot of the same characteristics, just kind of heightened. So if I refer to them as zombies, you guys know what I'm talking about, the infected. So there's a lot of good in this film. I just want to start with that. However, most of my positives for this film lie in the craft of filmmaking versus the story and what is being told to us, whether that is visually or whether that's in the screenwriting. And I already told you guys I'm a huge Garland fan, so it is sad for me to say that. But real quick, visually, I mean, the cinematography, the production design, the costume design, the makeup and the practical effects with the zombies are absolutely tremendous. We get a new kind of layer to these zombies, and I'm avoiding spoilers, but we get a new layer to the infected, kind of a different breed of them. And all of that stuff employed here is phenomenal. It's some of the best you'll see all year, most likely. Jodie Comer plays the mother in the film. It's basically a story that involves the parents, portrayed by Comer, and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who has been prominent in most of the marketing materials, and their young son, Spike, who is portrayed by young Alfie Williams. And this is the first acting credit to young Alfie's name. We also get some really cool, I won't say cameos, but sub-bit part kind of supporting roles. They're only in a few scenes, from Ray Fiennes, who is an absolute legendary actor, one of the best we have, and he actually was the best performance in this movie. He's only in a total of maybe 10 minutes of the film, even though he's kind of referred to throughout the movie. It takes a while for us to actually meet his character, but once we do, I was like locked in. He brought so much gravitas and nuance to the entire film, just based on this one little section of the film that he was involved in. He was just brilliant. I love Ray Fiennes. We also saw Jack O'Connell pop up here. He was really only in one scene, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that scene in depth, but we just saw him in Sinners a few months ago, and he is being lauded for his performance in that movie as the main antagonistic vampire that attacks the juke joint in Sinners. And it was cool to see him pop up again here, and kind of an unsavory role, but not so much a villain, but still kind of playing to that trope that we've loved him for in Sinners. So a lot of great performances in the film, led by Jodie Comer and Ray Fiennes, in my opinion. A lot of great technical aspects of the film. There's been things that have gone viral on TikTok and Twitter of where they set up this whole elaborate rig with multiple iPhones, because the majority of this film was shot on an iPhone using the Blackmagic video app, which is really, really cool, and obviously a lot more affordable in terms of a budget, although this is a big budget film. It doesn't look low budget by any means, and it definitely doesn't look like it was shot on an iPhone, although I've never really shot a movie on an iPhone, so I don't really know what that's supposed to look like. And it had that kind of grainy, evergreen kind of, not student film so much, but like guerrilla filmmaking kind of view to it. And much like that was a callback in a lot of ways to 28 Days Later too, which I know he employed different kind of digital cameras in filming that movie. And at the time it was thought this could have looked a lot better, but at the same time it was almost like a characteristic of the film to have that kind of grainy, almost outdated visuals matched with what was going on in the movie. And I love the consistency and the through line of that throughout the series, now employing iPhones, but still kind of carrying, there's something a little different and a little off from like a normal, Columbia Pictures production. Now, aside from those positives, which those are all top tier when you're talking about performances and the filmmaking itself, the direction, my problem with this film, and I'm going to keep it spoiler free, which is going to be tough, but my problem is that this is an extremely generic story. It is very derivative of a lot of other stories that we've seen in the zombie or post-apocalyptic even genre. And this is not giving anything away because I think the trailers pretty much tell you this, but it's like a group of characters that we're rooting for going from point A to point B. And in order to do that, they have to go through this kind of community of infected groups of people, and we've seen that literally a million times. This year, we'll probably see that 5 or 10 times alone. So the story was too bland for me, because once you kind of realize, okay, that's what they're doing, what else are you going to give me? And unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, it didn't really give us much more. Now, this is in the title of the movie, 28 years later, and it actually has been 23 years since we got that first movie. So that's a long time for the lore and the stakes to not really have been risen and not be higher. Now, in reference to that lore, without being able to give anything away from a spoiler-free perspective, they did add some very interesting and intriguing things to the infected. There are new layers to them. They are more nuanced of a community of infected people. There's different levels of them, and they did introduce a lot of things to this kind of horror-centric group of folks that plague all of these movies. But they don't do a whole lot with it, aside from just telling us that it's there. Now, you're going to say, if you're a fan of this franchise, well, of course they didn't, because this is the first movie of 3, so they can't blow their load in the first film. And there may be a point to that, but a lot of times movies that are known trilogies or known setups for a sequel suffer from that. I'm the first movie, I have to set everything up. Therefore, nothing really happens aside from basically exposition, narration, a few scenes of what the elements are and what we're dealing with. And then you kind of have to wait till the next movie or the next couple movies for all of this to kind of come into play. Now, if that's okay with you, and if you're cool with kind of slowly working through a franchise or working through a trilogy, then you're probably not going to be bothered by that. But I would much rather prefer a trilogy like this, where it's known that we're going to get 3 movies, to be compartmentalized to where they could each stand on their own. This could be chapter 1, and this happens, these characters are prominent, this is what this guy does, this is why this happens, we get introduced to this, you'll see that later in part 2, blah, 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 blah. But it's one movie. Think of like Kill Bill and Kill Bill Volume 2. Obviously a completely different genre, but Kill Bill 1, you could watch that and be completely satisfied. There is a cliffhanger, which is beautiful, but tons of movies have cliffhangers and then never have a sequel greenlit, and you can still go back and revisit those movies and they can be satisfactory and to your liking, and they stand on their own as a brilliant chapter in a larger story, but it stands on its own to be able to watch it by itself. Hell, one of my favorite movies of all time is Back to the Future. That was a known trilogy. I watched that first movie, and I don't care if I see number 2 or number 3. I don't need to see the next 2. I'm completely satisfied, and that's even with the to be continued card coming up at the end and Doc Brown teasing all the stuff about his kids in the future. It doesn't matter. Back to the Future is a perfect chapter 1 movie that stands alone. So I would have loved to have seen 28 years later do something similar, but instead what it does is it hooks you with various characters and various details introduced to these infected community that we don't really see anything else about that. It doesn't really come to any kind of fruition, which leads me to believe that we're going to see more about it later on in part 2, part 3. But I don't like that type of storytelling in a setup trilogy. I would much rather it be like, man, that was awesome. You know, we saw that, they did this. Maybe they'll do more of it later, but that's that. You know, introduce this and have that play out in 28 years later. Then when we get to the Bone Temple, we have more of that, but introduce something else that's in that movie, that's specific to that film, you know, and have that happen. And then in the third movie, you have all of it. You know, maybe you even introduce something new in the third movie, but you have, you know, I can't give away a lot of stuff, but you have some of the stuff that was new to part 2, and then you have all of it in part 3, and it's kind of a great like climax culmination of the trilogy. I like that type of storytelling much better, and that's why it just didn't kind of work with me the way it was played out here. Also, another thing that really kind of brought me down is the tonal like shifts in the movie, which I know a lot of people say that and that gets played out, but that's an understatement for this film. This is a haphazard, like, holy shit, it was almost like a different person shot every 20 minutes of the movie. It is very up and down, all over the place, roller coaster scenario type of filmmaking. Very, and I mentioned guerrilla style before, and I do appreciate that aspect of it, and I do love Danny Boyle's kind of train spotting vision, but sometimes it doesn't match with the story that's being told or with the characters that we've been following. You know, when Spike and his dad in the first 30 to 45 minutes of the movie, his dad's basically teaching him survival skills in this zombie world on his 12th birthday, because that's when you're old enough to really face the infected. So he's kind of teaching him what he has to do and how to navigate the land if he encounters one, and the different types of infected and whatever. And that's very interesting to the backstory and to kind of catch us up as to how the infected has evolved over the course of 28 years. So it was a cool way to do it without giving a ton of exposition or narration. But then Danny Boyle, I assume, or whatever creatives were involved, employ these weird stock footage like videos. I think they were from other movies, but I really don't know. But he'll insert like a 10-second clip of like an old medieval like knights fighting on the battlefield. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say Monty Python, but like those types of scenes, you know, where like knights are shooting bows and arrows, and like then it'll go back to our scene. And he also did a lot of those quick, frantic, energetic cuts of like night vision goggles of the infected in the woods at night, and it was like on a blood red screen, which I really do like that visual. I think it looks really cool. But again, why is it there? Like, it just seemed like a gimmick to kind of jar my attention, which I mean it did. So in that respect, I guess it worked. But from the flow of the film and the tone of the movie was very inconsistent, where 1 second it was a very sweet family, emotional mother-son connection in certain areas, the acceptance, dealing with grief and regret, and very, very deep kind of like meaning in a lot of the scenes and the character development. And then in the next like 5 seconds, it's like, oh my God, it's like a punk rock music video. And then the last thing I'll really mention is kind of in relation to that, when we get to the end of the film, the ending of this film really bummed me out. I'm going to give you guys my score in a minute, but I was probably around a 7-ish, even with all the qualms I just gave you, because I love this world. I was positive on this film, and really I still am. I'm just kind of mixed. I'm more mixed now. And going from positive to mixed really happened in the last like 5 minutes of the movie. So Spike is our main character. That's a ballsy thing for Garland and for Boyle to do, to put a 12 or 13-year-old actor that's never had any acting credits, by the way, as the central star of your trilogy-based blockbuster studio project. That's what they do, and I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you that. I will tell you that Aaron Taylor Johnson's character is very prominent in the trailers and the marketing materials, and he is absent from a huge chunk of this movie, which is fine if they explain it, and they don't. And that was another part of the storytelling that failed for me, because his character will just kind of disappear. And the way they set up his character in the first half of the movie, I didn't for a second buy that he would not be present in some of the things that play out in the second half of the movie. So that was a letdown too. But to have that kid at the core is a risk, first of all. But they did. And for the most part, it worked. When we get to the last 5 minutes, the kid who's carrying the narrative for us, we have to connect to him to be on this journey and to even get to the ending of that movie and have any semblance of the same type of emotionality that they're promoting. Without giving anything away, he kind of reaches a climax in his own journey. And we get closure with that character, pretty much. And you're like, okay, that was pretty predictable and kind of cliche, but okay, that's how his kind of arc ends there, and we're getting a sequel. We'll see what happens next or whatever with the parents, with him, but that is what it is. Okay, sure. And then, and I'm not even joking, you guys, to keep this spoiler free, I'll just tell you, with like 90 seconds before the credits roll, I'm not even joking, like I think it was like a minute and a half, maybe even less before the credits roll, we get introduced to like 8 new characters, okay, out of nowhere. And this is right after I thought that was it. Okay, 7 out of 10, decent movie. I had some issues, but okay. No, bam, completely. And when these 8 characters get introduced, the best way I can describe them, did you guys see Kneecap last year on Netflix? It got a lot of international feature love, but that was about the Irish dudes that are buddies that wear tracksuits that want to like be a rap group. That was what it was at the end of this movie. Out of fucking nowhere. Like, this is like a post-apocalyptic, no technology, barren wasteland of a film with fucking skulls building monuments, the bone temples and shit. And we're in the fucking middle of nowhere with no semblance of any kind of glitter or glam or anything. And then bam, drop in this fucking Irish punk rock music group. It was really fucking weird. And it's not even that I didn't like the scene, because it was a pretty badass scene, but it was just so out of left field that you're just so jarred and like taken aback, like you're experiencing an earthquake, and then the credits roll. It was almost like that little 2.5 or 2 minute segment with these fucking Irish tracksuit dudes. I don't know how the Boondock Saints are there. Scottish, I guess, because it's in Scotland. But the Boondock Saints are there, right? And then it cuts. So it's almost like that was like an end credit scene or something. So it would have made more sense to me. Although I'm not saying the 28 franchise needs end credit scenes, for the love of God, but that's what it was like, though. It's like, okay, Spike reaches his thing. Here we are. Okay, this is this. The credits roll, a mid-credit scene or an end-credit scene, bam, the Boondock Saints come in, they do this fucking shit, elaborate shit, choreography, whatever, and it's shot like Train Spotting, basically, which is obviously really cool, but it wasn't that. It was like a very poignant, subtle moment of like self-acceptance and reflection, and his connection to the infected and to his folks and to his goal and to his like place in the world and in this newfound, oh man, that's so great for Spike. Ooh, the fucking Boondocks. I mean, it was fucking weird, guys. It was a weird tonal shift that speaks to my issues with all the other tonal shifts that we're getting pieces of throughout the movie. So sorry, it just did not work for me. You may love it. It may work for you, but I'm super mixed on the film as a whole, and I really didn't like the ending of the film. So in wrapping up, I think it's tough for me to grade this film and to review this film because I was so highly anticipating it. It was on my top 5 most anticipated movies of the year. This is a very similar situation to what I ran into with The Life of Chuck about a month ago when I reviewed that movie. Whenever it's just a highly anticipated and so sought after for me, and I'm just waiting literal years in this case, almost years too in The Life of Chuck's case because it kept getting pushed back, and then it comes and it's like, okay, it just is really a letdown for me even more so. It's kind of emphasized. But what I would tell you is go see it. I am recommending it. It's a slight recommendation. If you are a fan of this franchise, if you like Boyle, if you like Garland, if you like the first 2 films, and if you're going to begin this trilogy and stick with this franchise, then you definitely need to see it because they're obviously setting a lot of stuff up, and there was a lot of stuff introduced, particularly to the infected and to the way they kind of do things and their evolution. They're going to be extremely important when you go into the Bone Temple and then when we eventually get the 3rd film, hopefully. But from your boy, 28 years later was a letdown. It's going to get a 6 out of 10 from me. I was going to give it a 5. I decided on a 6 because 6 is the lowest score for a recommend for me, and I am recommending it. But the 6 comes with an asterisk that if this was a standalone film, it would probably be a 5. But because I know this is a setup film and it's getting us ready for 2 more, or at least 1 more that's already been filmed, I'm giving it somewhat of a pass of that extra point to give it a slight recommend for you guys. 28 years later was underwhelming for me based on the hype and anticipation that I had for it, but I hope you dig it, especially if you are a fan of this franchise. Real quick, guys, I want to let everybody know about channel memberships. You can skip ahead if you want, but I have canceled my Patreon and I've shifted everything over here to YouTube. So for as little as $2 a month, you can help me out, and believe me, I need it because it costs money and even more importantly, time. And also I have to pay for the beer I drink out here. You get all kinds of sweet perks though. You get some custom emotes that you can use in the comment section on any of my videos and in the live streams. They include an emoji of my face with the beard, as was requested. You also get Timothy Chalamet in there, Mikey Madison holding her Oscar, the mom from Parasite. I added some new ones recently, Tom Cruise giggling like a fucking madman. You also have Queen Ariana Grande sipping some tea. It's a water bottle, but you get what I mean there. I'm also going to do member-only live streams for my Oscars predictions more and more frequently as we get closer and closer to the fall and winter season. But whenever I do that, I'm going to have a brainstorming session to kind of reorder my predictions. And I'm going to have my members in there only to help me come up with my predictions that will eventually go live on the channel. If all of this sounds cool to you, or if you just want to support a dude out in the garage drinking beer talking about movies, it would mean the absolute world to me. So all you have to do is click join below. There's a little video, it explains everything and tells you whatever and does that, and you can do this and do that, and I would love you. Thank you so much. That was my review of 28 Years Later. I hope you guys dig it a little bit more than I did. I am really, really looking forward to the new one in January, especially seeing Nia DaCosta's kind of vision on the way it's filmed and how it looks and all that kind of stuff. So I'll be hanging out. I'll be seated for that one as well. Don't you worry, and I'll let you know what I thought of it when the time comes. Let me know what you guys thought of this one, or if you're planning on seeing it, please let me know that also. I'll see you guys out here next time in the garage.